before we start, I just want to say that next week, God willing, we're going to have our challah bake, and I'm really, really looking forward to it because it's going to be really unique. We're going to do a little bit more of a savory challah recipe, and then I'm going to show you some like toppings and stuff in the kitchen that we're going to cook up together and make delicious challah. I'm telling you, this is going to be so good. You're not going to want to go back to plain challah after this. So that will be next week. So I'll post it on the group, and I'll send you all the recipe so you can have all the ingredients on hand for those who actually want to make the challah. And even if you don't want to make the challah, it's still worth it to join just for the fun and the demonstration, so you can do it on your own time. But anyways, tonight's class is actually really, really amazing timing because tonight begins very important and significant time period in Jewish history, which leads up to one of the most somber, sad, and important days in the Jewish calendar. So tonight, as we know in the Jewish calendar, we always, every day starts the eve before. So tonight begins the 17th of Tammuz. Now, we are in the Jewish month of Tammuz, and the 17th day in the month of Tammuz is fast day. So tomorrow is going to be a fast day, which we'll discuss in a few minutes. But it's the beginning of the 3 weeks of mourning for the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, for the temple. So let's just go back in time a little bit to, historically, in the times of the temple in Jerusalem, after the Jews came to Israel and settled in the land of Israel about 2,000 years ago, give or take 100 years or so, the Jews built God's home in this world. Now, this was the first time that there was an actual physical building, a physical structure, permanent in this world, serving a completely spiritual purpose. Now, this is something that's unique in this world because there has always been a difference or a separation between everything holy is, in heaven, quote unquote, and everything materialistic is down here in this world. And our job in this world is to use physical things for a spiritual purpose. But this wasn't just something physical that was being used for a spiritual purpose. This is an actual spiritual edifice, a structure in the world, in the physical world, which was manifested completely with spirituality, being the Beit HaMikdash, God's physical home, a dwelling place for God in this world. And we know that God is everywhere, and that God is not limited to any specific location or time or place. However, the Beit HaMikdash was a place where God's holiness was concentrated. And this was seen in the many, many countless miracles that happened daily, the sacrifices, the lighting of the menorah, the entire world, the hub of the Beit HaMikdash, which the entire Jewish nation come to and pray and bring sacrifices and perform services and really connect and have a place to be spiritual and to connect with God in an actual physical way. Now, when the Beit HaMikdash was built, the first Beit HaMikdash was built by King Solomon, and it was destroyed through a series of very, very tragic events. And the main reason for the destruction of the temple was because the Jews were no longer deserving of having a temple, such a spiritual place, in this world because of their behavior. Unfortunately, due to idol worship, and even more severe was their lack of unity and their lack of care for each other. And what happened is that the Jews were central in Jerusalem, but they lived all around Israel. And Babylonians came into Israel and they formed a siege around Jerusalem. Now, this happened on the Jewish calendar many months ago. We actually discussed it in a class earlier this year. And the plan was to weaken all the Jews that were in Jerusalem so that they would no longer be able to fight and overcome the enemy once they stormed Jerusalem and advanced towards the temple, which their actual goal was to destroy the temple, unfortunately. And the Jews had been under siege for many months now. And on the 17th of Tammuz was when the walls surrounding Jerusalem were broken through. The siege was broken, and the enemies of the Jews stormed Jerusalem and started waging war against the Jews in Jerusalem, advancing towards the temple and beginning the process of destroying the temple. And the Beit HaMikdash was actually destroyed 3 weeks later, which we know as Tisha B'Av, as the saddest day in the Jewish calendar. And throughout history, these 2 days actually mark multiple tragic events that happened on this day. And we see that this is a day where God has marked for tragedy and mourning and destruction. So we fast on this day, and the day of fasting means we starting in the morning, and I'll post the actual times when the fast begins for those who are able to fast. We fast until after sundown, like what would be the end of Shabbat, and we use this day as a time to focus on the destruction of the temple, but also on, even more importantly, the rebuilding of the temple. Now, you know, when we talk about a time of mourning, within the Torah, within the Jewish world, the idea of mourning is actually quite structured. You know, after, God forbid, a person loses a family member, there's a structure set up in the Torah for how this person should mourn. And this structure is actually meant to be a great comfort for the mourner, because it allows for the time for them to grieve and be connected with family and friends during this time and really process their loss, which is the time period of, you know, the week of Shiva, which, God forbid, no one should ever have to deal with. And after that, there's the Shloshim, and then there's the year of mourning, creating this structure of mourning for a loss. And we see that we actually have this structured mourning for the Beit HaMikdash as well, because the loss of the Beit HaMikdash for the Jewish people is not just a historical. The loss of our Beit HaMikdash, the destruction of our temple, is not just an event that happened many years ago that we commemorate. It's something that we experience every year, because every year that the Beit HaMikdash is not rebuilt, it's as if it's being destroyed all over again, because we're processing a loss which we're still missing. It hasn't been replaced, and the reason for the structure in place and the weeks leading up to the day of the destruction are meant for us to not only process the loss, but to focus on I'm sorry. The joys of doing it on my cell phone because my computer wasn't working is that when I get a phone call, the phone stops working. But here we go. So as I was saying, the idea of processing the launch is to focus on the destruction, but to actually focus on what we are missing so that we can work towards and delve into what we need to do to bring it back. You know, when a person is, God forbid, mourning the loss of a loved one, we focus on the life that this person lived, the beauty in their life, their accomplishments, but it often is, you know, focused on the past. And we always have in mind this idea of, you know, when we will be reunited by the resurrection of the dead, when Mashiach comes, and we will be reunited with our loved ones who have passed. But the focus is on the past. When we're discussing the destruction of the temple, we're not focused on the past. What we need to be focused on is on the future. And that's actually something that we can learn from the very name that we are in now. Now, the Jewish months, if anybody knows the names of the Jewish months, we are now in the month of Tammuz. And you would think that the months on the Jewish calendar are Jewish Hebrew names. Now, actually, all the names that we have for the months now on the Jewish calendar, you know, Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, Tevet, Shvat, Adar, all the 12 months, they are not names that are mentioned in the Torah. When the Torah describes dates in the Jewish calendar, the Torah describes the days of the month by number and the months by number as well. So when God is talking about Pesach, which Pesach is in the month of Nisan, in the Torah, now the Torah counts the months as Nisan being the first month. On the Jewish calendar, we count Tishrei being the first month because Tishrei is when Rosh Hashanah begins, and Rosh Hashanah is the first month in the Jewish calendar. However, according to the Torah, God counts the month of Nisan as the first month because that's when the Jews left Egypt and became a nation, and so that's the birth of the Jewish nation. So God describes in the Torah as the day of Pesach, which is the 14th day in the month of Nisan, as the 14th day of the first month. And Shavuot, which is the 6th day of Sivan, which is the day when we receive the Torah describes this day as the 6th day in the 3rd month. There are no names for the month, which we use now, in the Torah. So where do these names actually originate? They are actually Babylonian names which were given by our sages in the times when the Jews were in exile in Babylon after the destruction of the temple. So after the Jews were exiled, they formed Jewish communities in the country where they were exiled in Babylonia. After they left Israel, and there were many sages. There was a great yeshiva there because they had to build Jewish life wherever they were. As we know, we build Jewish life wherever we are. So these names were given at that time. But why Babylonian names? Why not Hebrew names? These are names which we use for describing Jewish holidays, describing events in the Jewish calendar. And not only that, if you look at the origin of the name Tammuz, not only is it a Babylonian word, it's actually the name of a Babylonian idol, of a god that was worshipped by the Babylonians. Something which is contrary to the Torah because we don't believe in idol worship. We spurn idol worship. It goes completely against belief in God and contradicts the basic values of the Torah. So why would we name a Jewish month after something so which should be desecrated, which is something that is so unholy? So let me tell you actually the origin of this name of the god. And I was doing a little research on the name and I discovered this, and it fascinated me. And it also it gave me so many questions that I felt like it was so worth discussing, because the fact that something that leaves so many questions for a Jewish mind is actually within the Jewish calendar is completely mind-boggling. So there's this mythical Babylonian fable that there was a prophet who was killed and burnt by a king and was resurrected as an angel and became the angel of tragedy. Now, the story is obviously not based in truth, but it was something that the Babylonians believed in, that this prophet was burnt by a king and he became the angel of tragedy. Now, what somebody needs an angel of tragedy for, I don't know. If you're creating a god, you may as well create a good one. But that's besides the point. So this name, Tammuz, was a symbol of tragedy for the Babylonians. And the month during which the beginning of the destruction of the temple takes place, the Jews decided that they would take this name, this idol of tragedy, and use this name within the Jewish calendar. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that we're embracing the name and what it symbolizes for the non-Jews? Obviously not. So what is this idea of taking something so unholy and transforming it into something holy and something spiritual? So actually we see that in this case, that something that has the deepest potential for negativity can be transformed into something supremely holy if it is correctly channeled. By taking the name of the symbol of tragedy and using it for a month that symbolizes Jewish tragedy, what we are giving the message is that we need to take tragedy, destruction, and transform it into growth and renewal. And that is something so powerful that by doing so, we are given an incredible ability to recreate and rebuild from the greatest destruction. And we see this in the fact that during these 3 weeks, beginning tonight and tomorrow, there are many customs that we follow, many of which actually mirror the customs that a person who is sitting Shiva or who is in the year of mourning for a close family member would have to keep. We keep those similar restrictions during this time. And there are 3 weeks from tonight until Tisha B'Av where we have certain laws of mourning. And then there are even further restrictions that we do from Rosh Chodesh until the 9th of Av, which we call the 9 days. But we'll discuss that at greater length in 2 weeks when it comes up. So now for the next 3 weeks, there are customs which include not having haircuts, not listening to music, not purchasing new clothing, and refraining from weddings or celebrations that could be pushed off to another time. So people wouldn't schedule weddings now, especially since music is not allowed. And it's actually very similar to the time period of Sfirat HaOmer when we mourn the loss of the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva. So these 3 weeks, we have the custom of doing things that are a symbol of mourning. But there is also an added custom, a further, even more important custom during this time. And that is to learn about the laws and the customs and the details surrounding the rebuilding of the Bet HaMikdash. Now, we don't just learn about the theory of the Bet HaMikdash, the history of the temple, the stories of the glory of the temple, but we're actually supposed to learn what is called Hilchot Bet HaBechira, which is the laws of rebuilding the temple, how to build the temple. Now, if anybody does online shopping like I do, I can't talk for anybody else, but when I shop online, I usually have a bunch of tabs open on different websites and or apps, depending on how often I shop for them. I have the app of the store on my phone. If anybody relates, you know what I mean. But I don't often buy half the things I put in my cart. I just browse. My Amazon cart is so full because half the stuff I don't end up buying, but I just keep them there in case I'm going to want to buy it, or in case I'm going to decide that I like it, or in case it's going to go on sale, or whatever it is. And we enjoy browsing and shopping and looking through things. And I actually like also going onto websites like IKEA or furniture stores because, you know, even though I'm not really just redesigning my house as often as I'm on design websites, it's still enjoyable. But one thing I can tell you that I'm not doing is that if I find a really beautiful bookcase, I'm not going to start reading the manual of how to put the pieces together. I might look at the pictures. I might even look at the specs to see if theoretically it would fit on my wall or fit in my living room. But I'm not going to be reading the details of the manual on how to put it together. When do we open the manual and read the details of how to build this piece of furniture, or how to assemble a piece of furniture, or even the nitty-gritty details of, you know, sizes and fabrics and things like that? I'm only going to be looking at that if I actually bought it, or if I'm actually buying it practically, not just in theory. So these 3 weeks, we're not just looking at beautiful pieces of furniture. We're not just reading about the stories and the beauty and the glory of the temple. We're actually supposed to be learning the laws of building the temple, reviewing the laws of how to bring sacrifices and the details of the services in the temple. What does that tell us? That tells us that this isn't something theoretical, and this isn't something historical. This is a time to actually be preparing for the rebuilding of the Bet HaMikdash. When will we have the rebuilding of the Bet HaMikdash? When Mashiach comes, we will have the third Bet HaMikdash, the third temple in Jerusalem. And these are things that we'll need to know. So if we look at this time period as, you know, we're sad because something happened in the past, then the temple stays for us as a thing of the past. But that's not what God wants of us. What God wants is that we should be focused on building the third temple as a present day necessary piece of information. You know, if you have a 12-year-old kid who's dreaming about the day that they're going to be able to drive a car, and they're sitting in the front seat of the car, they're 14 years old, they're sitting in the front seat of the car and they're checking out the buttons and they're watching as the adult is driving in the car, but they're not reading the driver's ed manual and all the details of how to take their permit test. You take the details of the permit test and you start actually learning all the information and what each sign means and the proper measurements for parking a car only when you're actually ready to take the test. So here in our time, we are actually proving that we are ready for the third temple, not just by theoretically thinking about it, but by doing things and by learning about the temple as something that we actually need to know. And by creating this frame of mind of, I need to know what will happen when Mashiach comes, we are laying the groundwork for a world where God looks at us and says, yes, they are learning those laws. They're ready for it. Let's make it happen. And this is the idea of transformation that we see. We're taking the tragedy of the past and focusing not just on the historical sad aspect of it, but as this is something we need to know now, because this is something that we're working towards rebuilding in the future. And that is something that transforms not just our day-to-day, but it transforms our mindset, it transforms our outlook, and it helps us take negativity and focus on the potential for growth, not just that comes as a result of it, but that is found within the situation. Now we know there's a very famous story of the sages who were walking along the ruins of the temple after the temple was destroyed. And the ashes were still smoldering, and they were walking along the Temple Mount, and they were just looking at the wreckage of the glorious house of God, which was burnt to the ground. And they were crying. And all of a sudden, they saw a fox which is a wild, non-kosher animal, coming out of the wreckage from the place of the holiest part of the Beit HaMikdash, from the Holy of Holies, where the Aron, the Holy Ark, had been in that spot. And when they saw this and they saw the level of impurity that was rampant in this place, which is the highest level of holiness and God's glory, and they were crying and crying. And Rabbi Akiva, one of the great sages, started to laugh. He was laughing. And the other sages looked at him in horror. Like, did you see what this horrific sight? How can you laugh at a time like this? And he said, my brothers, I laugh because now I have the proof that I was always looking for. What did he mean? He said, in the prophecy that the prophets would tell the Jews when they were warning them to repent, God sent many prophets to warn the Jews about the upcoming destruction which would happen if the Jews did not change their ways. And one of the prophecies that one of the prophets said was that there will be a destruction, and it will be so terrible that a fox will roam in the place of holiness. And then the prophet continued, and then eventually the temple will be rebuilt and the Jews will return to Jerusalem again. And Rabbi Akiva said, now I see that half of this promise is fulfilled exactly to the detail. And this gives me hope, and this reaffirms that if the first half of the promise came true exactly, I know that the second part of the promise will also become true, and the Jews will return to Jerusalem, and the third temple will be rebuilt. And this outlook and this mindset of Rabbi Akiva to look at the wreckage and see the rebuilding while the ashes were still burning is the lesson for each of us as we embark on this 3-week period of mourning. It is a time of sadness, but even more importantly, it's a time for action. It's a time of finding purpose, finding ways to grow, finding ways to do extra good deeds, extra acts of spirituality, extra mitzvahs in order to create an environment of growth and an environment of spirituality in a time that is by name symbolic of tragedy. Now, I say, it just so happens, but we know that everything that God does is never just by chance. And this year, it just so happens, which means that God carefully and specifically designed that there are two major events on the Jewish calendar that actually coincide and happen on the same day. And tomorrow is the 17th of Tammuz. It is the fast of mourning. And it is also the day that the cycle of Rambam is completed. Now, Rambam is the term that is given to Maimonides. Now, Maimonides was a great sage who authored many books of Torah. Among them, he authored the book that is called the Rambam. And the books of the Rambam are actually the books which outline every one of the 613 mitzvahs in the Torah, numbered in order with all the details. And all 613 mitzvahs in the Torah with all the laws, every single instruction for a Jew to live a life according to the Torah is in the book of the Rambam, in the book of Maimonides. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe instituted that Jews around the world should learn these mitzvahs according to a cycle, so that every Jew, no matter where they are in the world, is learning one mitzvah or a few mitzvahs, depending on which cycle, every day, in order to connect Jews around the world, because no matter where you are, if you are learning Rambam, if you are learning these mitzvahs, then you're learning the same thing as every other Jew around the world. And there are a few cycles. There's a cycle of learning 3 chapters daily to complete every year. And there's a cycle of learning 1 chapter, which completes it every couple of years. And then there's also the option of learning just the title of each mitzvah every day based on which ones are being in the Rambam and, the more detailed chapters. Now, tomorrow, we complete the cycle of learning the Rambam. And this is a yearly event for those who learn the daily chapters of the mitzvahs. And it happens on different days according to the calendar. We don't always have exactly the same calendar every year. So it happens that tomorrow we complete the cycle. Now, tomorrow is the day when we begin the 3 weeks of mourning for the temple. And what are the last mitzvahs in Maimonides? What are the last mitzvahs that the Rambam states we need to learn? Not just mitzvahs that we should know exist, but mitzvahs that we should learn in detail are actually Hilchot Melachim. Hilchot Melachim are the laws of what will happen when Mashiach comes. The laws of the redemption. And that is actually what we are learning now in order to finish the cycle. So the last law that we're learning right now, as we're finishing the cycle, is the law of what will happen when Mashiach comes and how to prepare for the arrival of Mashiach. Hilchot Melachim, the laws of what is the criteria for a king to be Mashiach. The real nitty-gritty of preparing for Mashiach's arrival, the arrival of the redemption. That is part of the Rambam. Now, the Rambam was writing these laws after the temple's destruction. And yet we learn these laws every year because we want to be ready and we want to show God we're ready for the redemption. We know the laws. We know what we need to do. We're prepared. We're not going to be caught off guard that when Mashiach comes and we have the redemption, we're going to say, oh, wait, what am I supposed to do now? No, we know what to do. We're ready. We're prepared. And this, the fact that we are ending the cycle on this day when we're so focused on how to prepare for the arrival of Mashiach and how to focus on the rebuilding of the Bet HaMikdash. And in that same day, we are finishing the cycle of Maimonides, which ends with these laws. This is where it's at. This is what it means to feel the destruction of the temple. And this idea is something very meaningful in our lives, not just for this time period, but in general, because we experience tragedies on many levels and degrees, unfortunately, very often. Personal tragedies, communal tragedies, challenges, difficulties on whatever level of gravity. To the person experiencing it, it's a loss, it's a destruction, whether it's loss of an actual person or an opportunity or a dream or a situation that is difficult. But we are learning from this what to do at a time of loss is to find the opportunity for growth. Now, that doesn't mean we don't take the time to mourn. We're not in denial. Difficulty exists. And we do follow the laws of mourning and the customs of grieving. But we do that while also focusing on how we can grow, on how we can rebuild, and on how we can become better as a result of this. And that is something that God is teaching us in this time period. And that is something that we can focus on during these 3 weeks of mourning. So tomorrow we are going to be fasting, which on a practical level means that there's no eating or drinking. We also try not to shower or bathe tomorrow morning until the end of the day, as much as possible. And we use this time as extra prayers and extra acts of goodness, extra acts of spirituality, extra mitzvahs to use the difficulty as a springboard for growth and as a springboard for added positivity. After tomorrow, for the next 3 weeks, we try to refrain from listening to music, getting haircuts, purchasing new clothing, and in general, focusing on rebuilding the temple while remembering the fact that every day that we do not have the temple, it's as if the temple is being destroyed. Because if we don't have the temple, we have to feel the loss. What is the loss of the temple? What is the loss of the Bet HaMikdash? What is this loss that we're experiencing? Because we don't remember a time when we had the Bet HaMikdash. So how can we feel the pain of the loss of it being there? You know, when a person loses a family member, it's very, very difficult. But for future generations, in theory, it's sad because this family member was lost. But if they don't know that person, if they never met that person, it's hard for them to feel the loss to the same degree. So if we never experience the glory of the temple, how can we really feel the pain of its loss and the lacking that we have in our world, because we never had it to begin with? So what we need to focus on is what the temple represents. The temple represents spirituality, godly presence in our world. And that is something that we need to feel lacking. That we look around in the world and we don't see God. We don't see beauty everywhere. We don't see only revealed good. We don't see a world of peace and harmony. That's not the world that we're looking at, especially today. We're definitely not seeing a world of health and positivity and goodness and openness. That's not the world that we're living in today. We're living in a world that is very, very contrary into a world of only peace and harmony. And when we look at it that way and we think to ourselves, what would the world be like to have holiness felt tangibly, to have godliness apparent to our eyes, not just that we have to search within our souls to feel spiritual, but we will see spirituality. That is what we are lacking, and that is what our world so desperately needs. So we need to focus on the rebuilding of the temple. We need to focus on the rebuilding of our spiritual energy in the world, not just in the way that we have to think about in order to connect with, but that it will be surrounding us tangibly, physically, that we're able to actually see God with our physical eyes. And that is what we are working towards. That is what we are striving for. And that is what we need to show God that we are ready for. So we are beginning the 3 weeks now. We are working towards this time period of not just mourning the temple, but rebuilding the temple. So I want to just end with a blessing that as today is the first day, tonight and tomorrow being the first day of these 3 weeks, we should not experience these 3 weeks of mourning, but we should be reunited in Jerusalem, the entire Jewish nation together with the coming of Mashiach, and we should actually see the rebuilding of the temple. Not that we have to just learn about the lessons of the temple, but we should actually see it with our very own eyes in Jerusalem with the coming of Mashiach. May it be now, today, even before we have to fast tomorrow.
Amen.
So on that note, I want to wish those who are fasting, those who are able to fast, an easy and meaningful fast. For those who are unable to fast the whole day, it is preferable to try to fast at least until midday. And then based on health abilities, to fast as much as possible. And whether fasting or not, we focus on the spirituality of the day, the meaning of the day, and the purpose of why we're actually fasting. So next week, Bezrat Hashem, I'll see you all on Thursday for our challah bake. It's going to be delicious, interesting, fun, and definitely inspirational. So I hope that you will all be there, and we will be in person because, you know, in Jerusalem, we're still going to have to bake challah. So our challah bakes are just going to be way bigger because everyone's going to be in Jerusalem. So that's going to be great. So may it be tonight, today, and we should all be able to celebrate together. It shouldn't be a time period of mourning, but it should be a time period of celebration with the music and the dancing, because we'll actually be celebrating the inauguration of the temple today. So wishing everyone a wonderful evening.
Mushka, just a quick
and
question.
I will see you all. Yes, please.
Okay, the fast starts tomorrow morning, correct? What, at any
Yes.
time, particular time?
It does start at a particular time. Let me see what that time is. Give me a moment.
Also, are we allowed to do anything creatively? In other words, like draw or any of that kind of stuff?
Okay,
or no?
so it is. We do not follow the laws of like Shabbat. It's not. There are no restrictions like that.
Okay.
So yes, that's fine. It's I might be frozen. I'm not sure. I'm just checking the time actually right now.
Okay.
To see what time it starts. Let's see.
5:12.
Tomorrow. Okay.
5:12 a.m.
5:12.
Yeah, 5:12 a.m. until 8:42.
Oh, thank you. Yes, 5:12. The fast begins. 5:12 a.m. The fast ends at 8:42 p.m. So if you're an early riser and you want to catch a quick breakfast before 5:12, you can do that. I definitely will not be. I prefer to sleep in the morning, but the fast will be over at 8:42 p.m. At nightfall.
Okay,
So
and then
that's tomorrow.
okay, thank you so much. And the restriction of the music, the hair cutting, not that I'm planning to get my hair cut, but the music, so forth and so on, is for 3 weeks. Is that
For
correct?
the next 3 weeks until Tisha B'Av, yes, which will be another fast day, which there are a lot more stringent laws on the fast day of Tisha B'Av because it's actually the day of the temple's destruction, and that actually starts from the evening before, but you don't have to think about that now. But yes, for the next 3 weeks, we have these restrictions.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes, of course. So good night, ladies.
Good night. Thank you so much.
And thank you all for joining. It's so nice seeing our regular faces, even some old faces that we haven't seen in a while. So good to see you all. And God willing, we'll see you next week for our challah bake. And we will see each other in person, God willing, before then.
What do you mean? We're going to see each other in person when?
God willing, with the coming of Mashiach.
Oh, okay.
But I would love to. I actually was going to, we'll discuss it more next week, but I was thinking to see how we can maybe arrange some sort of like in-person social distancing ladies evening. I was thinking maybe closer to Rosh Hashanah, depending on how the numbers are. We'll see what we can do.
Closer to Rosh Hashanah, we can enjoy in my backyard. You'll see.
Yes, so we'll see what's happening, how the numbers are, and
yeah,
what's going on.
yeah,
Everything's changing so often that it's hard to really plan too far in advance.
But it's getting worse actually. So Channel 10, about 9 employees have tested positive right now.
Oh, really? No, but it's very interesting because I'm hearing so much conflicting information because a lot of the tests are coming back as false positives now.
Yes, that's
because
very
of the rapid test.
Yes.
No, the rapid tests are not really so accurate, so it's hard to really know how accurate the numbers are anymore.
Yeah, you know, we actually got from LabCorp. They mailed us some tests. You go with your insurance and you do it at home and you mail it back. So we're doing that tomorrow. Just
Oh, really? Oh, interesting. Because I know a few people who got tested because they were going to, kids who were going to overnight camps all have to be tested before. And a few kids took the test and they came back positive, but they had no symptoms and anything, and they retested and came back negative.
Oy.
So that actually happened to my nephew, and my sister couldn't believe that he tested positive because he already had it.
Right.
Like 3 months ago. So she was like, something must be off because, he had it already, he couldn't have had it again. And it was a false positive. So we don't know exactly what the deal with the numbers are, but it's definitely, important to adhere to all the safety measures and do our best to, stay healthy and safe and follow the protocols that are being put in place. But we'll see what we can do closer to Rosh Hashanah and the high holidays to have some sort of social distancing in-person event as we get closer.
Go crazy over here. So
yes.
Right.
But in the meantime, good night, ladies. All the
Mushka,
best.
thank you for your beautiful teachings. We love it.
My pleasure. It's so nice seeing all of you. And I will see you all, B'ezrat Hashem, next week. Have a great night.
Good night, everyone. Bye.
Good night, ladies.
Good night.